Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Welcome. That is our first standing ovation we've gotten. How are you? Good to have you here. Eric actually just got into Seoul about 24 hours ago, I believe, right?
About 5 hours ago.
5 hours ago, actually. Okay, so if you want to fall asleep anytime, go for it. Thanks so much for joining us today. There's plenty to cover tonight, and I know that this crowd is excited to talk to you. So we're going to kind of spend the first 30, 40 minutes just going over some high-level topics. And if you don't mind, at the end, we'll just open it up to just people asking questions for about 15, 20 minutes. That's okay with you?
Yeah. Questions would be great.
Cool.
Okay. I'll actually turn this off. I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna actually put this in black, and then we'll actually.
Alrighty. And can everyone hear us okay, or should we turn up the mic? Just up? Okay. June, could we turn the mic up just a little bit? Alright, sounds good.
Okay, that's nice.
Sound like God.
Yeah, Mike.
Alright, Eric, so I appreciate you coming out. There is so much to start with, but we're going to start from the very, very beginning. Eric, tell us a little about yourself. Born and raised from where?
So I was born in New York, Manhattan, and at a very young age, my family moved to Missouri, which, for those of you might not know where that is, it's smack dab in the middle of the United States.
A lot of Koreans in Missouri. A lot of Koreans.
I think when I left, there were 3 or 4, and those were my sisters and my parents.
I'm sure there are still actually 3 and 4.
That's right. That's right. So I grew up in St. Louis, and grew up loving the St. Louis Cardinals, loving everything about St. Louis, Missouri, and then I went to school on the East Coast. And then after graduating from college, I told my parents that I wanted to go to Korea. And I think that was pretty shocking to my parents.
What motivated you to have that decision? You're in the smack dab of Missouri. Now you want to come to Seoul. What is that all about?
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with how my parents raised me, with a lot of cultural values that they took over from Korea. But at the same time, I think just something in my heart always wanted to take me back to the home country of my parents. And so I had an opportunity to do that after college. And actually, my first job was at a startup here in Seoul, South Korea.
Which startup was that?
It was a very small startup called NeoPoly. It was a mobile phone hardware company, actually. It was spun out of Stanford. And so I was here learning Korean and then also interning at this startup at the time.
If you don't mind me asking, what year was that when you had that first startup?
2002.
2002. I wasn't even born yet. That's amazing. So what was it like then? Tell us about that. 2002. You're in Seoul. It obviously probably does not look like this. Google Campus Seoul doesn't exist. Neither does Maverick Capital and all those great places to harbor this. What does Seoul 2002 startup scene look like?
I mean, this is amazing. On my way here, I walked here from my hotel and I saw team members from Memebox. I stopped by the Coupang headquarters. It's all on the same street. And then I take a right turn here, and there's Google Campus Seoul. I mean, it's pretty incredible. All this infrastructure that's in place, none of that was here 10, 15 years ago. There were the seeds. There were some incubators, there were some government-sponsored activities. But this is completely different now, completely different.
So after that startup, where was your next step? Where did you go?
So I went back to the United States, and I worked at a consulting firm called McKinsey. And when I was there, I did most of my work in North America, but I kept trying to get staffed on projects based out of Seoul, South Korea. And they staffed me on projects in China instead. I don't speak Chinese.
It's kind of close.
But that I did do a lot of, I would visit the office here and spend a lot of time. I went back, and then I went to Stanford for business school. And, I have a partner, we started Goodwater Capital together last year. His name's Chiwa Chien, and he graduated near the top of his class. And I like to joke that during the 2 years I was at Stanford, I barely graduated by the skin of my teeth. Because during that time I was there, I was working on another startup that was spun out of Stanford. And we got that funded. My co-founder took that over full time, and then I went to the buy side, or the venture capital side.
Yeah.
I don't call it the dark side, but yeah.
I didn't say it, you said it.
I was anticipating what you're going to say.
You know what's very interesting though is, and we could probably go into this topic for a long time, is it seems like from a very young age though, something about Korea drew you, and it's something that touches upon me as well, American born, and something drew me back here as well. What do you think that was in your life that kind of said, you're American born, you grew up in Missouri, and something has brought you back throughout your life here? What do you think that is? Because there is a kind of a growing trend of Kyopo's coming back. What was it that drove your passion for that?
You know, I actually think it's very consistent with the American identity. You know, America is a land of immigrants. So we all came from somewhere else. It's in our nature, it's in our DNA, in our culture, our history, our blood, a multicultural, diverse perspective. And I think as a Korean American, it's consistent along that trajectory. So for me, part of being American was actually understanding where I came from as well. And I think that embracing that from an early age was something that my parents encouraged. And so when I had the opportunity, I think that's when I was able to come out and explore that at deeper lengths.
I think a lot of people are actually going through that right now in this generation, so it'll be interesting to see years from now kind of how that will evolve. What's interesting also though is that has, I think, reflected on the types of companies you guys have invested in. So before we get into that, and there's great stories there, tell us kind of the thesis behind Goodwater Capital. What makes you guys unique among all the other VC companies out there?
Yeah, Goodwater Capital was founded last year, 2014. So we're a fairly new, we're kind of like a startup for startups, I would say. And both my partner and I, we have combined 20 years of venture capital experience. Also, we're entrepreneurs before then. You know, we were founded with the basic premise that we want to empower exceptional entrepreneurs who are changing the world. And we choose those words very selectively: exceptional, empowerment, change the world. And there's a lot of great venture capital firms out there, don't get me wrong. And so what we try to add to the ecosystem, I think, is reflected in our name. So you think about Goodwater. Water is analogous for us to technology and capital. Technology and capital can both be used for good causes, or they can be sources of destruction as well. Just like water. Water is the source of life for every single living organism here on the planet. It can also be the source of floods, tsunamis, and death. And so we want to be the good water in the ecosystem. We want to be that partner to startups that encourages them, that empowers them from an early stage. And then how do we do that, though? How do we do that in a differentiated way? You know, for us, it comes with the experience we have of coaching entrepreneurs, of having worked with some great entrepreneurs here, from Kakao, Coupang, and others around the world, from Silicon Valley, from our experiences there. Taking all of that, and when we sit down with an entrepreneur, we work with them and say, hey, we're gonna help you become the best CEO you can ever become. You know, you already have it in you. It's just us partnering with you along that journey. And we have a suite of services. We have our own engineering team. And we're a small firm, but we have a suite of services that provide a lot of support to the entrepreneurs. We're investing at a very early stage. And we really roll up our sleeves to try to help them.
And are you only focused on startups in Korea, or is it global? So sometimes people get confused. Is it just the United States? Is it Korean American entrepreneurs? Who are you guys really focused on?
It's a global fund, so we invest all around the world. We have investments in Canada, Silicon Valley, here in Asia. We're doing investments in Southeast Asia as well. And so Korea, as a percentage of the portfolio, is relatively small. However, you know, because of the density of Korea, because of the e-commerce, the offline to online trend here, the internet penetration, the relatively high GDP per capita, we look at Korea as a very strategic. We really view it as a crystal ball, especially in consumer tech, for us to really understand what's going to happen, not just here in Korea, but in Asia broadly, and also in the Western countries as well.
Let's go into that a little deeper though. So you've traveled the world, you've been to many different places where they deem themselves as the Silicon Valley, the next Silicon Valley. What about Seoul kind of differentiates for himself? What is so special about what's going on now that you've seen that makes it such an interesting place to invest?
Yeah, I think it starts with the people. Look, it's a Monday night. Everyone is very busy, and people are here at Google Campus Startup Grind event because they're passionate about startups. And I saw that even 13 years ago. 13 years ago when I came here, I came away when I went back to the States with a passion for two things: a passion for startups and a passion for global business and the global economy. So I really think it starts with the people here. That passion that everyone has to do their best, to create something new, to create something that hasn't been there before. So for us, that as investors, we love to partner with entrepreneurs that have that attitude.
Yeah, I would agree. I think talent is probably the key to the success of many companies. When you first got here in 2002, what was that talent level like, and how is it different now?
I mean, it was very technical. Back then, we had PhD candidate, students and graduates from the best universities in the world, MIT, Stanford, even back then. And they came. I think what has changed, if you fast forward 13 years to today, is that the skill sets have really rounded out. In addition to the technical and engineering skill sets that you had seen for over many years, you have the management skills as well. And so you have kind of the perfect combination now. Korea, which has been known to have very, very good engineering, and now incorporating best practices and creating their own best practices with regards to management and startup culture. What's amazing is if you give someone the book, The Lean Startup, or something about Agile, we've worked with a number of entrepreneurs here locally, and they'll eat it up. They'll read it, and then they'll iterate on it, and then they'll innovate on it. That passion, that drive, I think is something quite unique, and what I see now that's different than 13 years ago.
Clearly, I think you have a knack and eye for it, because if we're going to talk about the investments you've made in Kakao, Memebox, Coupang, clearly you're seeing talent there. So let's just kind of talk about some of these big hits that you've invested in. What was kind of the thing that drew you into those companies? Was it the entrepreneurs? Was it the business model? I mean, something attracted you to these huge, massive successes. Kind of walk us through your kind of investment strategy.
Well, I think every time I made an investment, most of the people around me said I was crazy. So maybe that's the first start. But when we were looking at Kakao, a lot of people thought Kakao back in 2010, 2011 was going to be a fad. That it was just going to be this, kind of blip on the radar and then just drop off. And there were a number of other startups that also had pursued a similar business model that aren't around today. I think it does come down to talent. Kim Bum-soo and his team, they had gone to Silicon Valley actually first, had a taste of it, tried a lot of different things that didn't quite work out, and then came back. So they took that global perspective. They took that experience.
Yeah.
And they applied it here, and then I think they really drove through on a product level.
That's really interesting. A lot of times people don't talk about failures as much. They just look at a company like Kakao and think they just went to the top right automatically. It'd be actually interesting to hear just that insight, which I don't think a lot of people know, is what did they try to do here, and how did they fail? Obviously, they succeeded now, but it's always, I think, interesting for entrepreneurs to hear it wasn't success 100% of the time. So what did they try to do here in the United States? Or in the United States, I'm not really aware of that.
Yeah, they had launched a number of different services and websites, and nothing really stuck, I would say. And then the iPhone launched, and launched 2009, but it started to really get traction, and that's when Brian Kim Bum-soo 회장님, really had the insight that this is the future, and that this similar takeoff that he saw in the United States with regards to smartphone penetration would also happen here in Korea. And so I think that he was able to, learned what they learned, and then came back and quickly iterated on this product that you see today.
Sounds like moving fast and making quick decisions was key to their success.
Yes, absolutely.
You said at that time there were many web messaging platforms though as well, so they weren't the first. What do you think differentiated from them? How did they kind of beat the pack?
Well, I think they were the first here in Korea, but they weren't the first globally. So WhatsApp had launched. I think there was MessageMe, other companies that had launched around the same time. I know WhatsApp was beforehand, but WhatsApp never took traction here in the local market. And I get a lot of questions like, why WhatsApp versus why Kakao? And people immediately assume that it has to do with the emojis. But I actually don't think that.
Science behind that. Right?
I think there's a science behind it. I think that helps sustain the growth over time. But I think the simplicity, the color schemes, the UI of Kakao, even Kakao came from this notion of chocolate, cocoa. The name even started with this very sweet, there's a story behind it. I think that had kind of matched the local taste quite well.
If you had one named Bingsu, that'd be good. Bingsu, I would eat that. So Korea has a unicorn. We've got Coupang. How did you find Coupang? How did you guys first get connected with that company?
Yeah, Coupang was a very interesting story. So at the time, Groupon was taking off in the United States, and the firm that I was with, Maverick, had actually invested in Groupon as well. There was a global thesis around e-commerce on the digitization of offline retail, and social commerce represented this really interesting dynamic of group buying. I mean, it's a great idea when you think about it. Let's all get together, let's all make sure that we're going to get enough critical mass and we're going to get good prices, and so we thought about where else would this group buying dynamic work. I looked at Brazil, China, other markets, and Korea, because of perhaps some of the cultural context that I had, it started to make sense that, wow, this could be a great market for it. Incredibly dense, great wireless penetration, and a somewhat, a population that likes to follow trends. I don't mean to overgeneralize, but if something catches fire here in Seoul, that's 25 million people you have an audience to. And so I think because of those dynamics, we became very interested. I think what took it over the top though for us was meeting Daum Kim, and so Daum had I don't know if you've met Daum, but he's a very talented entrepreneur, a great person, and so when I saw that he could bring his startup experiences from having done 2 startups in the U.S. and then bring that to Korea with this new business model, I thought it could be a great combination.
I think people are really excited about Coupang because I think there's this sliver of huge hope that people think that this is going to go global. And going global has always been kind of a big theme for Korean entrepreneurs. I mean, should they go global? Is it an automatic thing that they should? You and I have talked about this quite a bit. I mean, I think a lot of times people here think automatically we must go to the United States. That is what global is. But we and I have had that discussion, and sometimes I feel like the Korean market is just big enough as well. So how do you kind of see that for young entrepreneurs here in Korea? Should they go global? How does one think about approaching that question? And if they do, is global the United States or other places as well? That's a lot, sorry.
That's a great question, or questions. I would first start by saying there's a very important notion when I think about whether you should go global is this concept of product market fit, which I'm sure everyone here has a strong understanding of. With regards to how that applies to the Korean market and Korean startups, though, is that if your product literally has a market in terms of a geography, that geography's market's a fit to that market, then I think it's a very, very strong case to go global. If your product doesn't have a natural fit to that market, though, it's less. What I think something that a lot of people don't realize is if you go to a lot of Southeast Asian countries, if you look at the top 50 pop songs in those countries, I think 80 to 90% of them are from Korea. Korea has already started exporting amazing, I guess, goods in terms of media and all these things. And so I'm very excited about startups that take advantage of this trend of Korean pop culture going global. And I think that it has hit the US, but Southeast Asia is really a great ground for Korean startups to try to take advantage of, or try to enter, I should say. Indonesia, I think, is one of these markets that's going to be very exciting to watch over time. They have about 30 million smartphone users today, and that's going to grow to 100 million in the next 5 years. It's
100 million?
100 million. So it's going to make it a top 5 country in terms of smartphone penetration. Now, for us, we could go directly and invest in the Indonesian market, and we likely will do that. But we'll also look to Korean startups that can capitalize on this amazing growth in an economy that has 250 million people. And so, I think that's just an example of how companies should think about going global. And you start to see companies like Memebox, Korean Beauty. Amori Pacific is, I think, now about a $22 billion company based here in Korea. And a lot of their market cap is attributed to their growth in China and other countries here in Asia. It's not attributed to their growth in the US. So you think about that for a second. A $22 billion market cap company, plus or minus a few billion. And that is a comp. I think that shows that companies here can get to huge scale by going global as well.
So how important is it for you when you're looking at a company to invest that it has global potential? I guess I'm wondering, is Korea enough? I mean, if a company really, like you said, is a product and it fits within this culture, and it will be #1 in this country, and it's going to be a hit, but it may not be hit somewhere else. Is that enough for you to make an investment, or does it have to be global?
I think it is enough. If you look at the pure numbers of $40 to $50 billion e-commerce market, that's going to be tripling over the short term here. It's a huge market. This is a huge market in a very dense, great market. I'm going to speak out of two sides of my mouth at the same time, though. I would say that we are looking for that special entrepreneur to take his company, his or her company, and go global as well. And that's something that my thinking on this has changed significantly in the past 4 or 5 years. I think 4 or 5 years ago, I really believed strongly in just regional champions. And I think for a lot of markets like e-commerce, I've talked about this before, that for e-commerce, there will be regional champions. But at the same time, if you look at audience-based companies, the Facebooks, the Instagram, which is now part of Facebook, if you look at those companies, even Snapchat, they have horizontal market leadership. They're number 1 through 10 in a lot of different countries outside of the United States. And I think that for Korea, that's really the exciting thing, is that in addition to taking advantage of this local market here, you have the opportunity to become a horizontal winner across East Asian countries, Southeast Asian countries, and the rest of the world, including North America potentially.
Sure, and I think no one's nailed down how to go abroad, but if you've seen the companies, and you've seen many successful companies do this, has there been one kind of consistent pattern or strategy that you've seen companies use that have been successful when they go abroad, and some companies that when they try, they fail because they didn't? I mean, that's a tough nut to crack, but everyone has this ambition to go global, and even for our company, we're constantly thinking about how do we go global, but there's no right way to do it. Has there been something that you've seen been successful for other companies that, when you look at these, they've been consistent on?
Yeah, I think, I wouldn't say I have all the answers here, but
What?
one very consistent thing that I've seen is that when a company is successful in a market that's not their home country, what is very common about what they see early on is that they don't have to spend a lot on marketing to grow in that market. And so whether you're entering Japan or Southeast Asia or China or other parts of the world, I've seen time and time again entrepreneurs come to me and pitching an idea. Well, if we're going to enter this market and we're going to raise, X amount of dollars to enter that market, and I ask them, well, have you tested? Do you have the product out there? Have you seen how this grows? What's your K factor or your virality factor early on? And this goes for both audience-based businesses as well as e-commerce businesses, I would say. And you can really measure whether you have product market fit at an early stage. And so I think it's kind of the anti-case where I see a lot of companies trying to pour money in early on, which has led to kind of unsustainable growth. Yeah.
So you probably get pitches all the time. So just that we have a group of entrepreneurs here as well, and this is valuable insight you're giving. Is there something that you absolutely would tell an entrepreneur to avoid when pitching a VC? I mean, we've had a few VCs up here tell us what they want to hear, but I always think it's kind of fun to hear. You've heard many pitches. What should they avoid? What do you not want to hear when someone's asking for money?
I believe it or not, I think it's when the entrepreneurs are not being authentic. So I can tell within the first minute if an entrepreneur is trying to pitch what they think I want to hear. So if you can just sense it that they and they're very earnest. They've done their research. They've talked to other people. They've tried to figure out, hey, what does so and so, what does Mike Kim want to hear in this meeting? And you can really tell. And I see this across the board for both U.S. startups as well as startups here in Asia and Korea. And so when I sense that, it really hinders the conversation because we are trying to figure out what you're about. Often for a first meeting, I'll spend probably 75% just trying to understand that person's background. Where did they come from? What are their motivations for doing this? And really understanding them at a very deep personal level, if possible. I know that's hard in a first meeting. And so when we get these pitches, it's kind of like, well, we know you want to hear X, Y, and Z, and they're kind of just going off that. I think that's fine, but make sure that this is really about you. I tell entrepreneurs, the biggest investor in the startup is not us, it's you. You're putting your lives, your reputation, your entire self in this. And we're going to be there right with you. So I want to get to know you during a meeting.
I will not bullshit you ever.
Please.
No problem. So many cultural differences. Has there been something you've noticed between a Korean entrepreneur and a U.S. entrepreneur? Is there something that's been different that you've noticed? Maybe it's, the education systems are different. The way we pitch, I think Koreans think is respectful. The way Americans think is respectful is different. The way we communicate. Have you noticed that when a Korean entrepreneur pitches you or an American entrepreneur pitches you, that's different, or is it the same?
Well, I still can't get used to the term 대표님. I'm not a 대표. I mean, I am technically, but I still call me Eric. I think, it's amazing. One of the first things that Kakao did was they got rid of all titles and they went on a first name basis on their campus. So you go on their campus today, you see on all their screens first names of who they are. So I do think that there's some of that but we're all, in the US, in Silicon Valley, there is no age. You can be a 22 or a 19-year-old entrepreneur and you can sit in the same room as a 45-year-old Silicon Valley veteran. It doesn't matter. Age does not matter. And so I really love that. I love that aspect of Silicon Valley. And I would love to see more of that here as well. And I know there's a lot of things that go into that. A good friend of mine, Jimmy, from K-Cube, just became the CEO of Kakao.
대표님.
Right.
You can call him that.
I'll tell him that tomorrow morning. And so, that's great. The 34-year-old CEO of a major tech company here in Korea, I think that's hopefully the trend. Now, I'm not saying one way or the other is necessarily better, but just the fact that that can be embraced. And so I would love to see more of that, just pure focus on quality, on experience, quality and the merits of people versus your age, your educational background, what family you came from, even your gender. I would love to see those barriers being broken down more and more.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, actually. It's a very exciting topic. I think all too often I heard the story of people not being promoted because of their age. It seems like there's kind of this situation where you work for 5 years, you get promoted, and then you get another 5 years, and get promoted. And you have a lot of young people who have the talent to be in leadership not get that simply because of the year they were born. Which leads to another topic of what do you think then, as great as Korea is right now and Seoul is for the startup ecosystems, what are the challenges they will continue to face? One of which is what you said is young people not getting the ability to have leadership positions. But I think Jimmy becoming CEO is going to actually send ripples for a long time. But so age is one. What other things do you think are going to be hurdles for the Korean startup community as we try to be a massive global center for entrepreneurs?
I mean, maybe I'd frame it a little bit differently. I'm not solely focused on, that young people should be promoted, per se. I just want people to focus on a meritocratic system, where all we care about is the quality of that individual and what they can contribute and their merits. And so I think that, compared to 13 years ago, Korea is a completely different place. I mean, we are on the right trajectory. But I just want to encourage everyone that unless we continue to embrace sometimes out-of-the-box thinking, or sometimes, something that might not seem normal, we have the danger of potentially entering stagnation and these things. But I think we're on the right trajectory. I think it's really a focus on a meritocratic system and finding really the value that people have that's intrinsic to them as individuals versus where they came from.
Turning the page now, one of the things that people always ask about is getting the investment. But once they have the investment, the first 3 months are incredibly important. You can either sink or swim there. What's kind of your advice to an entrepreneur? They have received the funding now. How critical is the first 3 months, and what do you think an entrepreneur or CEO at that time should prioritize? What do you do now? You got a bunch of cash now, you're ready to go. How do you spend that first 3 months?
This might sound a little bit weird, but I specifically tell entrepreneurs, don't worry about short-term performance. And so, when you make an investment, it can be incredibly nerve-wracking from our side. Did we make the right bet? And so it's always nice to see after you make an investment, oh, well, the charts continue to grow, up and to the right. But, we've made the investment. We know that there's risk involved. We want you to make good long-term decisions. So for the first 3 months, forget that it's the first 3 months. Think about this as a startup that, that you had created that, when you pitched me, this is going to be the last job you ever have because this is what you're passionate about. Don't make short-term trade-offs, especially when you have money. It's the best time, you have the money in the bank. But, sometimes there's this sense of urgency, false urgency to try to grow the charts up and to the right. But I think when you have the money, when you have the full support and the trust of your investors, don't worry about short-term performance and really focus on fundamentals for the long term.
You're seeing a lot of companies come across your desk right now. What do you see kind of the future trends in Korea right now? What are you really excited about? What gets you fired up and saying, that's a space I really want to invest in? What gets you kind of staying up at night thinking about stuff?
I can't, thank you for asking that question, because I literally can't fall asleep sometimes when I think about this. I mean, there are some amazing startups that are coming out of Korea right now. 4, 5, 10, 15-person engineering teams that actually may not be very well known here locally, but are getting amazing traction overseas.
Some examples?
So take Azar, which is like a video chat, kind of chat roulette startup. They have amazing traction, not necessarily here in Korea, but everywhere overseas. When I need to do consumer research, so we do a lot of research, we talk to consumers, right? So I'll use Azar and I'll start pinging people in random countries to see how they use certain apps and products in their country. And that was created by, someone here locally in Korea.
Are people familiar with Azar? Have they heard about that? No? Interesting. So we have one person. The future.
So if I told you that they had maybe 50 million downloads, that might be shocking.
Azar?
Yep.
How do you spell that?
AZAR.
Let's look that one up. So why do you think that's getting traction outside? It's a Korean company, you said, but it's getting traction outside. What have they been doing that's so special, and why do you think they're not getting traction here then?
I think that their product just has global fit in the markets that they're in, and so maybe the Korean consumer just hasn't been exposed to it yet. This idea of randomly chatting by video with a complete stranger in another country, that might fit better for some countries.
That's like sogeting, basically. Random people you don't know.
Yes, I guess in sogeting you at least know who's introducing you. In this case, you know the app as ours may be introducing you, so it's a little bit different, but maybe we'll get there.
So any other global trends that you see that are kind of exciting that if people were to go into space or watch, what vertical should they be watching right now?
Yeah, so I mean for us, there's kind of the classic things around audience-based businesses for photo video, for e-commerce-based businesses as well. Continue to watch those. The on-demand economy is going to be something to keep an eye out for as well. And on-demand, I think, is really interesting because in each market, I think there will be more regional players that win. So we just backed a company called Pager, which was co-founded by Uber's technical founder, Oscar Salazar, based out of New York. It's on-demand healthcare, on-demand doctors. And so there's probably going to be a Korean equivalent. And so you could look at a lot of cross-border trends. And then I think also something to keep an eye out is the wearable space. And so thinking about virtual reality, thinking about watches, thinking about all the things around hardware devices that can make for some pretty fantastic consumer experiences is something to keep an eye out for.
In the wearables, what's more exciting to you, the actual hardware itself, or do you think the software behind it? I mean,
Yeah, I think that they're going to be highly vertically integrated. And so I think you're going to have great customer experiences or great consumer experiences. They're not going to be necessarily a single hardware platform that then has other people building on it. I think there might be, in initial stages at least, more of the Apple type vertically integrated plays that'll be very interesting.
Gotcha, okay. And kind of wrapping up here, just on a few personal notes here, when people do want to reach out to you, or any VC, any kind of best housekeeping manners, everyone's reaching out to a VC. What's kind of the things that you would like to see when people reach out to you?
Well, anyone is more than welcome to reach out to me, first of all. My email is eric, E-R-I-C, @goodwatercap.com.
You just blew up your email address.
I think it's just, I think it just comes down to authenticity. When we get an email, just like when we meet someone, you can tell whether they've blasted everyone with the same exact email or whether they're trying to be authentic and come in relationship with you. And so I think, thoughtfulness goes a long way. We as VCs, we try to be as responsive as possible and respectful of your time. And so, I think, frankly, entrepreneurs' time is much more valuable than venture capitalists' time. And so what we try to do in return for your thoughtfulness is to try to be direct, try to save your time, and be helpful.
And moving forward, if you could kind of suggest something that Korea could work on to kind of improve the startup community. I know a lot of people have been talking about, let's say, government regulations. One is having a little bit more lax visa, so more global entrepreneurs can make it easy to come to Korea. What do you think could really kind of spark the next generation for Korean startups? What would you suggest? Let's say you have a private conversation with the president, and you're saying, here's how we can get to the next level. This regulation is kind of holding us back. And if we were to open up this floodgate, we can bring in a wealth of new entrepreneurs, funding. What do you think right now, if there is, or you can disagree, but if there was something that you think we could change now, what would it be?
I mean, based on my experience from 13 years ago, I am so thankful for how far the ecosystem has come already. It's just night and day. And I would say that I would encourage the Korean government to continue to help startups in any way possible, whether that's funding, whether it's incubating space. I think that's tremendously helpful. And I think we need to also celebrate both our failures as well as our successes. So for every Kakao and Coupang, we need to also think about, how do we encourage those that might have not done as well and to get back on the horse and get back and try for the next big thing. And so I think that's more of a cultural change. I don't think the government's going to have all the answers. I think we, as a people, we have to figure out how we embrace a couple of somewhat dynamic concepts, a meritocratic system, and also kind of embracing failure. And so I think it's upon us to really try to embrace that. And so I think all the regulation, all that stuff will follow. Can we make foreign investment easier? Can we harmonize some of the laws with international investment? Maybe. I'm not a legal expert, but I think it really starts with the attitudes and kind of culturally what we embrace, and then we can go from there.
Sure. I'll finish off with this one then. So 13 years ago, you were here, there was a startup scene, and now it's come to this. Look 13 years down the road, where will we be?
Self-driving cars.
Korea? Seriously, I mean, you must get to see so much great technology come across your desk that, where do you see Korea in 13 years? What's going to be different?
Yeah, I think we're going to see another wave of unicorns. I think you're going to see a lot of great startups come up, and I think it will get to a point where we see so many Korean companies coming to Silicon Valley, wanting to visit Google or Y Combinator or Facebook or all these things. I think in 13 years there'll be two-way traffic. I think American entrepreneurs will actually want to come here as well and see, hey, what can you do in a country that has 50 million people in the landmass the size of Indiana? What can you do in a country where the GDP has grown so tremendously fast over the past 10 years? And what can you do in this kind of dense and urban population? And think about ideas from that perspective. I think in 13 years, we'll probably see that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Are you going to be around for a little bit afterwards to answer a few more questions from folks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So, Eric, this was an amazing hour. Thank you so much. Your insights were phenomenal. And if you guys can help me, just give me a huge thank you to our awesome group.